Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. Today's video is going to be a little different. So for those who don't like it when I touch upon political topics related to the royals, my suggestion is to go ahead and skip this video as well as the next. But if you want to stimulate your mind and maybe learn something new, then continue playing this series. I will ask if you could help me out and go ahead and like this video so the algorithm can pick it up, because this for sure will get suppressed based off of the topics that I will be going over. Focusing first on the WEF. How many of you guys knew that Klaus, who is an agenda contributor driving this new world construct, received a knighthood by the Queen in 2006? I find that surprising, and I've been digesting it. It does have me a little concerned based off of what has been going on in the last 2 years. It makes me reevaluate and think about the principles that the monarchy is holding currently today as they continue to align with the globalists. So just a heads up, I will be using some alternate language to be a little more YouTube friendly. So pardon me if you may not pick up on some things. If you do have any questions, please ask it in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer it. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. So let's now talk about this great, I want to say, recalibration of society. And it was the major push that King Charles had described and led with our buddy Klaus. Let's remember that nobody appointed these people to make these kinds of decisions. However, they want the UN to be a governing body that oversees all of us globally. So to give you an example of one area, the UN agency is calling on governments to implement a global ethical framework by using the UN's agency framework. So this woman, Linda Thomas Greenfield, she's an ambassador at the UN, had the audacity to send a report by the International Commission of Jurists that was titled The 8 March Principles of a Human Rights-Based Approach to Criminal Law Prescribing Conduct Associated with Reproduction, Intimate Relations, Drug Use, HIV, Homelessness, and Poverty. So essentially, they're creating a legal construct on, advice on how you should approach these topics and apply the law. Well, essentially, it is decriminalizing having intimate relations with people who are under the domestically prescribed minimum age of consent for intimate relations, and that it could be consensual, in fact, if not the law. Thank God Senator Marco Rubio wrote a letter to Ambassador Thomas Greenfield saying that you can't approve this, by saying, "We write with grave concern regarding a report presented at the 52nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council that explicitly undermines the safeguards of our society has established to protect our children from the, I want to say, predators of the PD files and other criminals. We stand firmly against any foreign effort that seeks to undermine the well-established legal principle that children do not possess the emotional or mental maturity required to consent to intimate relations. We therefore request your immediate opposition to these efforts and to rescind any U.S. taxpayer money that may have directly or indirectly supported United Nations activities related to the report." I will be talking more about this in another video pertaining to this series because it is important. These so-called leaders, with the exception for William, I can't really say anything about him, but everybody else have done a number on the world in what they're pushing. People are dying, people are suffering, and it's all for greed. This WEF describes itself as the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation, whose mission is to engage with leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. According to this group, Shaping global and industry agendas is no small task. In order to do so, the WEF counts among its leadership team powerful and influential people, including the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, Vice President Al Gore, and Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock. So, who is this Larry Fink guy? Well, he's the CEO of an investment firm called BlackRock, and it controls a huge number of shares in some of the largest companies in the world. They have, in this investment firm, a total of 10 trillion, that's with a T, trillion, in assets across the globe. So, to put that in perspective, that's an amount equal to half of America's total GDP controlled by just one company. How much money do you think that they profited off the suffering of a pandemic that they unleashed onto the world? Allegedly. Pfizer's up in here, Moderna, and good old boy Larry, since he is an agenda contributor. WEF's partners include more than 1,000 corporations from around the world, along with national banks and some of the world's largest non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, the Bank of China, and every major pharmaceutical company are all counted among the WEF partners. Why do you think there's such a big push for transitioning these kids and putting them on lifetime of hormones and medication? It's all for money. This ESG, I've mentioned this in previous videos before. It's this guy who is pushing and trying to play God. All for money. If you don't believe me, hear for yourself.
That's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we're doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
We're doing the same thing.
and so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
If anything out of this video that you take away is understanding that these people are not in it for helping anyone. More recently, in the year of 2019, under the influence of Klaus and the WEF, this business roundtable, an association of more than 200 CEOs of America's leading companies that represents maybe nearly 1/4 of America's GDP, agreed to redefine its principles of corporate governance. Each year since 1997, these principles stated that corporations exist to serve their shareholders. As of 2019, these principles instead focus on a fundamental commitment to all of our stakeholders, which includes fostering diversity and inclusion and embracing sustainable practices across our businesses. Apparently, what they're telling the public is that this drive to transform the economy is Klaus's and company's belief that the capitalism that created so much prosperity in the golden age of American capitalism in the 1950s and 1960s is now creating inequality and climate change. According to the WEF, this great recalibration will consist of 3 main components. The first involves efforts to steer the market towards fairer outcomes. Achieving this component will require governments to make changes to tax, regulatory, and fiscal policy. The ultimate goal there is more equitable outcomes. For who? Them? Now, they think that in order to achieve these equitable outcomes, it would have to include government policies punishing fossil fuel companies and setting up new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. The second component would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. Massive government stimulus and welfare spending, along with green energy mandates, are the preferred tools for this goal. And the third part of this is harnessing the innovations of the fourth industrial revolution to support the public good, according to their website. So, the fourth industrial revolution refers to the exponential growth of technology in fields such as artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, biotechnology, and energy storage. The WEF desires the opportunity and power, aka control, to shape this technological revolution and direct it towards a future that reflects common objectives, actually their common objectives and values. And their measurement of success is pushed through the metrics that they give to corporations. So the goal is to compel companies to disclose metrics on their financial statements. Those with higher scores will be rewarded with easier access to capital, while those with lower scores will see diminished access to capital. So it's all about the money. With the backing of the world's largest investment firms like BlackRock, who owns practically the world, even large corporations will have ample incentive to adjust their behaviors in accordance with the metrics, both in order to access money and to appease these massive investment firms, which oftentimes own substantial shares of the company's stock. Well, we can all see that this plan is not working out so well. So the threat is very much there to our freedoms, to free markets, and even prosperity. Look, say what you want. Tell me that I'm going too much into conspiracy territory, and realize that the fact that you can say that to me today is a freedom that can be taken away tomorrow based off of what these people are doing. So if you continue to ignore it, to think that this doesn't exist, it's not real, then you're going to find yourself one day in that position where when you want to say something, you can't. The people who belong to this web have so much money and power concentrated in this small group of members and partners. This group possesses enough political sway to exert massive pressure to make governments bend to their will, and are doing it currently today. So in Klaus's mind, he has this belief that the market knows best, and it has been proven wrong. So to be clear, the market Klaus is referring to is about people and businesses freely making voluntary exchange. Such voluntary interaction, in his mind, must be overridden with governments and ruling elites like himself setting clear rules for what is allowed to take place in the market. This is all what this great recalibration reset is really about. And make no mistake, the WEF crowd doesn't sell stakeholder capitalism as a superior method of generating wealth and causing poverty to recede. No, they're not solving any of that. Instead, they view economic stagnation as a feature, not a bug. For instance, they identify affluence as the greatest threat to the world, while also claiming it's not necessarily a bad thing if growth slows to a crawl. That sounds so scary. Economic growth, don't kid yourself. They're not looking for any of that in their view. That's the enemy because of its supposed threats to the environment, right? Never mind the millions of lives in third world nations that would be lost due to economic stagnation. I've said this time and time again. This is not about serving society and having fair outcomes. The real agenda is one of centralized power, forced compliance, and impoverishment. So this hard push that these globalists have been pushing has finally started to backfire on them to a point where now they're losing money. So Larry Stink, at the end of June, at the Aspen Ideas Festival, Larry Fink said he's no longer using the term ESG because it's being politically weaponized and he's ashamed to be a part of the debate on the issue. Well, dude, you're the one who is forcing this onto the world, and the masses have showed that they don't want it, hence why you've lost so much money. So this guy wants to distance himself from the mess that he's made by saying, I'm not going to use the word ESG because it's been misused by the far left and the far right. So guys, now what you're going to see, because obviously the equality, gender identity, whatever that they have been pushing has backfired spectacularly. They didn't make the money that they were expecting to make. So now there's a shift. So it appears now that the shift for BlackRock is going to push climate change as the cornerstone of their business. So everything that touches the climate for companies, they're probably going to restructure their metrics and bye-bye diversity, bye-bye women's equality, bye-bye helping the minorities. Yeah, say goodbye to all of that because that's not going to get these companies paid or capital, as he had explained before. This has turned out to be one big mess. In fact, they've made things worse, and now we have to pick the pieces up again. But this time, they're going to push this climate change onto us, and we're going to have to suffer because it's clear that they're going to be removing fossil fuels. They're going to probably impose taxes in areas, utility companies. I mean, these people have no soul, no conscience, but we should feel bad that for the first time in his professional career, the attacks have become personal. Well, stop playing God. So I'm going to close off this first part of the series that I'm doing here with reading an article by a journalist named Michael Schellenberger. Now, for those that don't know who Michael Schellenberger is, he is the brave journalist who spoke about the Twitter files with Matt Taibbi. So this guy has been a real advocate and champion for the American people and for free speech. So he writes, the unpopularity behind elite demands for spying and censorship. Social media companies, including TikTok, Snap, and Twitter, caused people in France to riot, and so the government should shut them down, say French President Emmanuel Macron, and the European Union's top censor Thierry Breton. Said Macron, when things get out of hand, we may have to regulate them or cut social networks off. The reason, Breton explained today, is that social media didn't do enough to remove content that is hateful, that calls to revolt, and to kill, warned Breton. If they don't do it, they will be sanctioned immediately. The comments made by Macron and Breton are shocking, and anybody who cares about freedom of speech should denounce them as a clear and present threat to the fundamental human right to freedom of expression as enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the French Constitution, and the European Constitution. It's true that there are legal protections for removing content that is hateful, that calls to revolt and to kill. Such immediate incitement to violence is even illegal in the United States, which has much stronger free speech protections than France and Europe. But neither Macron, Breton, nor their defenders have presented any evidence showing that hate speech or incitement to violence rather than outrage over police killing, combined with a large and restless immigrant population that France has failed to integrate and assimilate, caused the riots. And their calls for greater censorship come at the same moment that the Macron government has passed a new law allowing police to spy on people by secretly taking control of their phones and laptop computers and activating the microphone, camera, and GPS. The government says a judge will have to approve all spying, but it is reasonable to worry about abuses of power. In 2013, military contractor Edward Snowden revealed mass U.S. government spying without a warrant. What's more, the attack on privacy and the demand for censorship is worldwide. The British Parliament is expected to pass legislation in the next few weeks that will allow the government to spy on private and encrypted text messages. The Irish Senate is expected to pass legislation in October that will allow the police to enter homes without a warrant and search phones and laptops for evidence of hate speech. And Australia is on the cusp of passing a new law that would require social media companies to remove any speech that causes harm to health or the environment, which would allow government censorship of criticisms of its climate and energy policies. Why is the attack on free speech and privacy happening in so many nations simultaneously? And what can be done about it? Their right to worry. And this completes part 1 of my video series. In part 2, we're going to talk a little bit more about this censorship issue and what is happening to our rights. We are going to be talking about this report that Prince Harry contributed to in the next video, so you don't want to miss it because there are some serious things that need to be brought to light now as a result of events that have recently happened in Congress.
The fact that Twitter was working hand in glove with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the intelligence community to suppress free speech and things that were not true is disturbing. That is why we are here today.
It's no shock that our media here in the United States played down these Twitter files. It's my opinion, and I will share that in the next video, but Harry is an enemy of the state, and we're going to talk all about it next. So be sure that you're subscribed and you turn your notification bell on. You don't want to miss when I drop this next juicy video. As you know it, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.